Hello, oh, 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 yes. I thought my microphone was off. Hopefully that level is decent. And hello and welcome here to the Daily Quest episode number 41. My name is Solid Jake, and today we are talking about Stitches, a hero that, honestly, we really didn't see a whole lot of in competitive heroes for a very long time. Like many, many months, we just did not see Stitches used in tournaments. And then suddenly, this past weekend, for the European qualifier, the first qualifier here for spring 2016, we had Stitches played a ton by a variety of teams, and he saw a really, really high win rate. Now, we do have to point out the fact that there were a lot of mismatches, a lot of situations where these teams, like Team Liquid or Dignitas, were facing off against teams that are a lot less experienced, and Stitches was generally on those more experienced teams. So there is a bit of a mismatch in some of the games that we saw, but there's still a huge case for the hero based on this. Now, what changed about Stitches? What really brought him to the front of the meta like this so suddenly? I mean, he saw bans. Like, to go from being extinct to seeing bans is really weird. There's a variety of things that really contribute to the resurgence of Stitches in this sense. So let's just take a look at the hero. Now, a few patches ago, Stitches received a new talent called Hungry for More. This is just permanent health every time you pick up a globe. This gives him a lot of health in late game. And Hungry for More is nice and all, and it did help him out a lot, but it wasn't quite enough. While this last patch that went through just a week or two ago, they gave Stitches more auto attack damage. I believe it was a 20% damage increase on all of his autos, which is significant. And they also gave him more damage on his slam. So they really just made him a bit more of a bruiser. They gave him more impact in that regard. But beyond that, they didn't really change much. But the other things that are really helping Stitches out in this patch is just the scaling changes. And the scaling changes have caused this whole big change in the meta in terms of which warriors are prominent. I mean, there's less Leoric being played. Leoric is very good. Drain Hope on Stitches. I mean, it ruins Stitches' day. So that's actually, I mean, he's just a really strong hero against Stitches. The warrior has shifted to be very prominent. We see a lot of ETC, a lot of Johanna, and a lot of Murden. Murden largely considered to be the number one warrior. And Stitches does A-okay against those heroes. But, you know, getting your hook onto something like Leoric has always been a very painful thing. So it's definitely something that you have to consider when it's also one of the factors that have brought him back to the front line of meta. The other thing is that since it's a little bit more of a burst-centric meta, ever since the scaling changes, heroes die easier. Like, the damage to health ratio is much higher. Hooks can then have that bigger impact. And we're not even seeing fights initiated with the hooks. The presence of that hook, that constant threat of we have to think about our assassins constantly being pulled out of position, and it's a presence that Stitches really just gives the team. It's not something that's like, you know, you don't even necessarily need to land the hook. You have a constant threat every 16 seconds of that hook coming out and killing someone. Now, I actually tweeted saying I don't really understand exactly why Stitches did come to the front of the meta, and apparently Europe had been using him in scrims, which explains why it was so clean. He had been already pretty popular in scrims, but upon getting the damage buff, it was sufficient to bring him into the competitive matches, and he saw the results. Will we see Stitches used in North America, Asia, etc. to this degree? I have no idea, but I certainly hope so, because these games are really exciting to watch, and Stitches is a really powerful hero. Let's take a look at some of the builds that we saw this past weekend and some styles that you could do Stitches on your own. We have 3 builds that I mapped out here, and they're really just kind of designed to make Stitches the right fit for your composition based on what you have. So if you're running like just the lone support Stitches, you want to stay alive to the best of your ability, and you're really just worried about damage in general, you're going to go for the max tank Stitches, which, I mean, these names are just what I decided to name it for the moment. And this is really just going to be a very, very sustainable style of Stitches. You go for Hungry for More at level 1 to give yourself all of that self-sustain. At level 4, you're just going to go for Amplified Healing. I mean, this is just going to let you have all of that additional healing received, and Stitches becomes very, very hard to kill, especially in late game after you've gathered a lot of globes. Level 7, you want Tenderizer. Tenderizer, the thing about Tenderizer that makes it so good is it's just like every auto is a slow. And Stitches becomes really annoying when he's chasing. He's not really like a lot of the other warriors where when they're in the front line, they're providing a lot of control. You think about Muradin dwarf tossing in and then thunderclapping and then throwing down that Stormbolt to lock you in place. You think about Skeletal Sweave on Leoric slowing you down. You think about Condemn on Johanna. All these heroes have a different kind of control when they're in the front line, except for Stitches. So Tenderizer fixes that. It makes him much more powerful when he's in the front, and gives him a little bit more peel and control in those battles when he's a melee hero and not just have that displacement from the hook. Level 10, for this build, it's kind of situational as to which is better. Now, Putrid Bile is generally speaking the better option, so if you're not certain, just get Putrid Bile. But Gorge definitely does have a place in this kind of build because when you're the full tank Stitches, sometimes you just want to remove a damage from battle for a period of time, and you can just nullify them with Gorge. At the same time, if you can manage to land a hook or manage to get into the face of Malfurion while he's using Tranquility, you can deny the enemy team that healing. Now, they did just nerf Tranquility on Malfurion, and this could also be true for Cups, but you're better off just stunning Cups. But it's a nice ability to really just pull someone out of the fight for that full duration, which is only 4 seconds, but it's a long time when it comes to Heroes of the Storm. Yes, it doesn't really do a lot of damage to them, and it's going to spit them out, but you can really pull them out of position. You can nullify them for 4 seconds, and then capitalize after the fact. Also very useful if you're feeling confident on pulling someone behind their wall. If you get those hooks and you can just spit them out by your fort behind your own wall. It's a really fun play to do with Gorge that can have a huge impact, especially late game kills. Gorge is so good for picking up late game kills. Level 13, we're actually going to go for Relentless. Now, Stitches, when he's in the front, he, again, doesn't really have an immediate stun, but a lot of warriors have an escape, and Stitches is one warrior that really doesn't have that. You look at Muradin with Dwarf Toss, you look at, Iron Skin on Johanna, there's ETCS Power Slide like Eldraune's Might and Tyrael. There's a lot of options for most warriors to have some kind of escape, and in the event that you ever go Gorge, you have to get Relentless, but even if you go Putrid Bile, which is a 1 minute cooldown that gives you all that movement speed, and slow on your enemies, you probably still want to get Relentless as well, just because of how prominent stuns are in the game right now. Having the 50% reduction on silences, stuns, slows, and roots, literally everything, is in a lot of situations going to be crucial for Stitches to be able to get on out after he commits to those fights, because you want to stay in there as long as you can, of course, but you also want to get out alive. Level 16, Fishing Hook just is too impactful to pass up. An additional 40% range on your hook. If you land one of these max range hooks when the entire enemy team is clumped up and you manage to pick one of their crucial heroes, like a support or an assassin, the chance of their team being able to follow up and save that hero is very unlikely. So Fishing Hook is just... it's such a huge upgrade on this hero, and it just gives Stitches so many other opportunities on various battlegrounds where that hook can have insane value, pulling someone out of their own base on something like Blackheart's Bay. Some really cool stuff you can do with Fishing Hook. Level 20, most of the time, you do want to go for Hardened Shield. Now, if you did go for Gorge, there is a huge case for Bolt of the Storm, because you can Gorge that target. Again, that target's stuck inside you for 4 seconds, and then you just Bolt of the Storm in the opposite direction of their team, and that target is now so far from home, and unless they have those little red slippers, they're probably not going to make it back to base. So that's the max tank Stitches. We're going to take a look at a variant of this build, more or less following exactly what we see there as our first replay today. But before we get there, let's just run through the other builds very quickly, because we're just going to kind of separate this as a build discussion and then replays as the second half of the video. Up next, we have the mid-range Bruiser style. We actually saw this played in the European qualifier this weekend as well. And this is just a little bit less on the side of just generic sustain, and a little bit more on being in your face and doing damage when you can. So level 1, again, Hungry for More. You're going to see that pretty consistently for most builds on Stitches, just because of how effective it is. But actually, we saw them pick up Putrid Ground. And Putrid Ground is, we actually used to see Glaurung play this style a long time ago with Putrid Ground, because every time you slam, you're going to put that Vile Gas on the ground on all the enemies. So you're going to be throwing this nice damage over time on the ground. This gives Stitches a lot more lane clear, and it also gives them great presence when it comes to team fights, and it gives them just good AoE damage. So sure, they buffed his autos and they buffed his slam damage, but this is going to put his trait on the ground as well and make Stitches just kind of have a lot of consistent damage, and this is just a big damage buff for the hero in general. Vile Cleaver is not quite as impactful from my experience. Mercenary Lord, really not worth it on Stitches. Amplified Healing, if you really need the sustain, of course, We saw that in the first build, very, very good for that, but Putrid Ground will do a good bit of damage. Level 7, you're actually going to go for Last Bite. Now, this is something that you have to be a little bit more skilled with to get the full value out of it, because basically this is, you kind of need to use your chew, your bite on that target when you think they're about to die. You have a 3-second window after you use Last Bite, but if you mess that up, it's kind of like stacking with Asmodan. You don't get the value out of the talent. But if you manage to do it successfully, it's a 15-second reduction on your bite. Now, this is going to give Stitches a very snowball-y kind of feel with Devour. You're just going to use Devour, get a ton of health back. Even though you're not going for amplified healing, it's still a lot of self-healing there for Stitches, and it does a lot of damage. I mean, Devour as a base is 319 damage, and to minions. Why does it say that to minions? Or 114 to hero. So it does a lot more to minions, does a lot less to hero. So you can use this on minions, of course, and mercenaries to really just finish them off and heal up quickly. It's kind of like, if you think about Kerrigan and the way Kerrigan works with Ravage and with all the siphoning impact, you can just kind of heal yourself up. It's also useful for those kind of situations there with Last Bite. So very powerful talent just to keep Stitches alive, give himself sustain, especially in those drawn out fights. And if you are able to use that against enemy heroes, sure, it might not be as much damage, but it's still going to keep you alive a lot more effectively in long drawn-out battles, and that's what Stitches wants. Next, you're going to go for Putrid Bile. Again, this is Stitches. He needs an escape in a lot of situations. He doesn't have that Dwarf Toss. Putrid Bile is his way to really just zone, control, peel, and get out. It's good for all of the above. Very strong heroic ability. Level 13, once again, Relentless. Just you need that get out here. Even if when you're going the style, this is oftentimes going to be a little bit more of a damage-oriented solo tank, but you're still more squishy when you go this build. Fishing Hook, just grab it. Too good to pass up. And level 20, once again, going for Hardened Shield. Last but not least, we have a full Bruiser build. This is as bruisey as it gets, except for Heavy Slam. Heavy Slam is 50% increased damage, but Slam, even though after they buffed it, it doesn't really feel like it's all that much damage, honestly. So I don't see a lot of value in picking up Heavy Slam in any situation. I feel like Chew Your Food is probably just going to be better. It's going to give you a little bit more sustain just as a baseline. You're giving up a little bit of damage, but you're going to get yourself a little bit more sustain in return. And it's sustain over time, so you can use that bite in the middle of the fight. You're not trying to get the last bite here with this build. You just, halfway, when you're at half health, you just want to bite your target. Level 4, we're just going to go for Putrid Ground again. A lot of damage. Level 7, you want some control. Go for Tenderizer. This is going to just allow you to stay on your targets a little bit better and keep that slow applied to them. Putrid Bile, just stick to it. I mean, Gorge, not really going to get you that max value. Mega Smash, huge radius and range on your slam. It's going to give you just a bigger arc in general. And then 16, you're going to go for Pulverize. Now, back in the day, Pulverize was a true stun. It was a 1-second stun on the enemies, and it was a little bit too good. Now it's a 75% slow. They used to have Earthgrass Totem there on Rhaegar, used to be a 1-second root as well, and they also changed that to a 75% slow for 1 second. But this is just going to make Stitches really hard to get away from once he's on you with that Putrid Bile, and you're throwing down these huge slams that are hitting absolutely everything. Your assassins are just doing so much damage in the backline. Just makes Stitches a very damagey and control-y type of hero, but he does need big heals for this style of build. He doesn't have a lot of sustain himself. Yes, he's a warrior. You're sacrificing at level 1, you're sacrificing Hungry for More. If you feel like your support would actually work better, if you've got like a big healer on your team or something like Ancestral Heal, and you just want to go for Hungry More over Chew Your Food, you're certainly welcome to do that. If you feel like you don't even need the sustain at all and you want to go for Heavy Slam at level 1, do it. But I think that's the one talent tier where you can really mix things up here for this build. And level 20, you're just going to go for Regenerative Bile. Now, you could definitely go Hardened Shield here. I just wanted to try to mix things up because this gives Stitches a lot of self-sustain at level 20, and it gives him an additional 2 seconds there on Putrid Bile. So, and additional 10% movement speed, excuse me. So, I mean, it definitely has like some merit to why it's a good talent. for the level 20 upgrades, it's actually one of my favorite ones because it just makes Stitches feel super fun when you're running around and slowing all your targets with the combination of Putrid Bile and Heavy Slam and Tenderizer. It's like overkill the amount of slow that you have available, but you're just constantly slowing everything. And it's just, it's really satisfying. Like, I honestly think it's probably the most satisfying way to play Stitches if you just want to go ham and go home. Alrighty, well, those are 3 styles that you could play Stitches. This past weekend in EU, we saw those 2 on the left, the max tank and the mid-range as it's labeled on the screen. And if you're going try hard, those are the builds you probably want to do. If you just want to have some fun, try the full Bruiser style of Stitches. In the second part of this video, we're actually going to go ahead and take a look at 2 replays from this past weekend that we saw in the European qualifier. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be back in a bit.